Okay, hi everybody. I think we'll get started. Um, Welcome to the session, Engaging Students with Audio, Creative Ways to Use Audio for Teaching and Learning. My name is Jeremiah. I work with the Department of Technology Enhanced Learning here at MTU. So today's session, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is the first kind of audio-specific training session we've delivered in TEL. So that's kind of exciting. So hopefully it'll be of value. So what I'm going to try and do in this session is really help you to understand the pedagogical benefits of using audio in teaching and learning, kind of identify some practical ways to incorporate audio for student engagement, and then maybe begin planning and thinking about how you might use audio tools and techniques in your own teaching contexts. So just kind of an overview of the session. I'm going to start just with a bit of a kind of history and context of audio in education. As I said, this is probably the first audio session we've done in TEL, audio specific one. So I think having a sense of the history is helpful. And then I'm going to talk about audio and podcasting. I'm not talking about podcasting really as a way to encourage you to podcast. I mean, if you want to, by all means, but kind of thinking about podcasting and the idea around the idea of narrowcasting, and I'll explain that in more detail in a while. And I think that's what's applicable today in terms of how we can use audio for engaging with students. And then probably 15, 20 minutes in, maybe we'll do a demo using audio on Canvas. So look at things like media submissions, feedback, using audio in pages and audio in discussions. And then maybe towards the end, maybe just highlight a few kind of future trends and trajectories. So what are the benefits of using audio? So audio is really useful in the sense that it enhances listening skills. So, I guess a lot of what we do in kind of teaching and learning, we're really trying to help our students to kind of actively listen, to kind of interrogate kind of ideas, critical thinking. And so just having audio content really helps that. It allows them to just focus entirely on the auditory content. So I guess something that we talk about in TEL, if we're making video content or other multimedia content, is making sure that everything aligns and supports itself. So the images and the audio and so on. Otherwise, you get a kind of cognitive overload. And that kind of leads on to the second point here. So, the aim of, or the benefit of using audio is that it reduces cognitive load. There's no kind of likelihood of you having images that are kind of dissonant with the audio to confuse the learner. They can just focus on the auditory content. So I think that's really helpful. Audio encourages imagination and visualization. So if we think of like listening to an audio book or reading a book, let's say The Lord of the Rings, for example, your imagination and your visualization is really engaged because you're kind of imagining the story, what the characters look like, and so on. Whereas when you watch a movie, the director has kind of prescribed how it's visualized. So that's kind of a good analogy, I think. So when students are just listening to audio and not using visual cues, they have to kind of conjure up their own kind of mental imagery to kind of associate the concepts with something, and I think that's really, really high value kind of element of using audio. Audio is quite accessible and it's very flexible. In terms of other kind of media content that you might produce for learning, audio is probably the easiest in many ways. The tools that we have at hand, phones and so on, and I'll talk about that in a while, make it really, really easy for us to use audio. Obviously, if you want to do it very, very well, you can, spend more time, use better equipment, have a specialist support you, but you can do a lot on your own with audio. In terms of kind of ideas like UDL, audio provides an alternative modality for learning. So, you can provide content to students in different ways. You can give them text-based content, you can give them video content, you can give them an audio version of the content as well. So it kind of provides multiple means of engagement in that sense. Historically, audio has been used for language learning. I think that's, really, really useful and, tried and tested methodology. But I think linked to that and kind of beyond that, if language isn't your area, it's that critical listening function. And there are a lot of kind of intangibles that you, beyond the text, if you're to transcribe a piece of audio and you get your text transcript, I mean, that's really useful. But there's a lot of inflection in the human voice, a lot of emphasis, and there's kind of the student is able to interpret that as well. It kind of gives them extra levels of detail that would be lost in maybe just a transcript of your audio, and then their critical thinking is engaged as well. So audio enhances memory retention. So really here, what I'm talking about is iconic memory versus echoic memory. So the sensory memory functions that we have, your visual memory cues, iconic memory. If you look at something and you want to take in that information, you're able to control that visual sense, so you can look at a tree for a longer period of time. But if you hear a sound, that sound is much more transient. It happens and it disappears. You can't decide how long you hear it for. So in our brain, the echoic memory, that audio memory, has a longer kind of period of retention in the brain, in terms of short-term memory, and then in turn that can be kind of loaded into long-term memory as well. So it has a different kind of memory processing, as opposed to visual memory, which is kind of interesting to think about. Some other benefits, it's really cost effective. In comparison to making a video production, for example, the equipment is cheaper. You can do quite a lot on your own, and you can do things like creating audio feedback very easily in tools like Canvas, which I'll talk about a little bit later. New tools that we have here, Canvas Studio. We had a training session last week on Canvas Studio, which is a really great multimedia tool in Canvas for video and audio content. So I'll touch on that a little bit later. If you missed out on that, there's a training session from last week on the TEL YouTube channel. We can also do things like audio assignments, like reflective pieces, read a paper, give thoughts, and so on. I'll touch on that in a minute. And also dissertation supervision. So I guess if you're supervising undergraduate students or postgraduate students for major studies, often they're writing a dissertation or a large report of some sort. And you're going to be reading it, giving them feedback, often text-based. I've had first-hand experience of having work supervised by audio, and actually I found it really, really helpful. So rather than having a kind of a written transcript, the supervisor would read through it with like the voice notes function in their phone. They would give some feedback, page 1, this is a really good introduction, maybe you should add in this. And then they would pause the voice memo, continue reading, and then when they had something else to say, they would unpause it. Unpause, I'm on page 3 now. I think what you said here is really good, but you should use, sources X, Y, and Z as well to strengthen that argument. Pause and continue on. And then you end up with like a 5-minute audio clip, which you can, transcribe yourself or use an AI tool to get a transcript of it if you do want a transcript. But I got like much, much richer detail. I guess if you think about it in terms of time, if you're typing out all that feedback, if you're typing multiple pages, that's time intensive, labor intensive. So so if you're giving feedback, it's worth trying that. If you're kind of open to that idea. So yeah, these are again some of those benefits like flexibility, less pressure. So I think this is a good one as well. Researchers and lecturers find it easier to get to talk informally without having to worry about their on-screen appearance. So as soon as we turn on our webcam here, like I'm talking to you in a session, I'm more conscious of everything as opposed to just my voice. I can, if you're just delivering an audio lecture, you can just think about what you're saying and be less conscious of the presentation to the camera. So yeah, there are other elements about inclusivity as well. So, some people don't have good internet access. Maybe they're paying for the data usage. So if you're giving them video content and they're paying for that data packet, that's more expensive. Audio is a smaller data file. And actually another kind of useful point on the bottom there, refining voice. So if you're getting your students to do presentations, for example, encouraging them to do an audio recording of themselves, to practice their presentation and listen back to it. It allows them to be kind of more objective. When you're in the moment and you're presenting something, you don't realize the kind of little vocal nuances that you use. But when, like, for example, if I watch back a presentation like I'm doing now, I hear that I say and ah a lot. I'd like to reduce that. For some reason, I also go a lot as well. I don't really know why I do that, but I must try to get that out of my spoken voice. So really quickly, just a kind of a history of audio in education. So this is from kind of a series of images of the future, kind of future technologies from France. So this is the year 2000. This is what people back at the turn of the century were kind of thinking the year 2000 would be like. And here you see the the classroom in the year 2000 with the students with, you know, headphones on, and the teacher isn't actually teaching them. He's just feeding books into this machine. Someone's turning the cog, and the information is being piped into the heads of the school children. Um, it's kind of a maybe a ridiculous mechanism, but the idea is accurate, especially when we think about podcasting and how we kind of consume information, especially on the go these days. Um, so just by way of a really quick history of audio in education. So audio has been kind of one of the main multimedia type content pieces of modes of delivery of education for 100 years now. So if we think back to the 1920s, radio broadcasts were used for education. This was able to bring information to a really wide audience at a distance, and it also allowed specialists to kind of talk about a particular topic using their expertise and bringing that to a wider audience when it might have been more difficult to get that expert into the classroom. And if you think of, teaching drama, literature, radio plays, the BBC obviously are kind of a leader in this area, like radio plays and things like that, would have really supported that kind of drama learning for school children and so on. In the 50s and 60s, with the emergence of audio tapes, kind of World War II period, language labs would have been would have kind of come to the fore. The use of tape recorders enabled the development of language labs, and students were able to practice listening and their speaking skills using recorded materials. And I think that's really, really useful. And again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier on about the nuance of listening to recordings. You can read French, but you can't pick up the accent by just reading it. You have to hear it. You have to hear it in context. And so again, that's an obvious value of audio. These kind of language labs were quite specialist, but as cassette technology became more widespread, it was easier to disseminate this kind of educational material on cassette. Later on in the 90s, CDs and multimedia content became more prominent, so you could have CD-ROMs and so on. This is an older Irish language course that would have been on tape and kind of video originally, I think, and updated for CD for a new audience there in the 90s. And in the 2000s, there's a big paradigm shift in the sense of the emergence of podcasting and digital audio. So podcasting allowed educators to share lectures, tutorials, and supplementary content on demand, as opposed to radio, which was not on demand. It was scheduled, timetabled. So that's kind of a paradigm shift in terms of audio for education. In the 2000s, the 2010s and onwards, audio became a feature of online learning. So the integration in terms of virtual learning environments or learning management systems, such as Canvas, for example. And so here you can see just two screenshots from Canvas. The top one here highlights that you can use media recordings. So you can upload audio content as a kind of a form of assessment, and you can also attach or give audio feedback there. You can also speak into the feedback function in Canvas, and that'll type the content for you. So kind of you can see how audio becomes more integrated into learning management systems. In the 2020s, so now and onwards, AI and audio tools in education. So AI tools create personalized audio feedback, speech to text features, and immersive audio experiences for active learning. So Notebook LM, I'll talk about in a little while. But on the top there, you can see the ChatGPT app. And like this is a really interesting one. So I've got like an 8-year-old boy at home who's really into Nintendo Switch and Pokemon games. And so whenever he has a challenge at a certain level now, he asks me, can he use ChatGPT to ask it how to get past that level? And using the voice app, so ChatGPT has a voice app, if you're not familiar with this, on the phone. So you can just turn on the voice, you get this kind of blue circle that kind of tells you that it's ready, and you can start speaking to it. And it's actually really interesting because he has to give the AI the context for what he's trying to get information for. So he has to say, in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu on the Nintendo Switch, in level 5, what do I do to beat the final boss, or whatever it might be? And ChatGPT will respond to him, and then he can either say stop and change the question, rephrase it, or he can ask it further questions. So he's got a kind of a discursive kind of learning mode there. And maybe Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu isn't the most useful educational context, but in the same way he could ask about the solar system or whatever else. And I think that's really, really interesting. Again, it doesn't remove the need for specialists, but it's kind of a helpful kind of learning tool. Okay, so really quickly, I just wanted to show you one or two examples of the use of audio for learning and teaching. So this is like a kind of an animation of some Stephen Hawking ideas made by The Guardian kind of a number of years ago. So let me see. So this one. And actually just an interesting point about this is the quality of the audio. So if I play this, you should hear it.
Particles can fall in, leaving the other to escape. This tiny stream of escaping particles is known as Hawking radiation. Now, those particles that fell into the...
So you might have heard that little click there. So that click there is digital distortion. So whoever recorded this, the audio level was too high and it kind of clipped and it gives you that digital distortion sound. So the audio wasn't good. And it's something that we often talk about in TEL actually when we're making audio and video content is you can often get away if the video isn't perfect, but if the audio is bad, people will recognize it immediately. And you know, if the audio quality is bad, they'll in fact often turn off. You know, it's harder to get through the video if the audio is bad. And just by way of that, then we have just by way of example of that, then here's a response to that video. This person said great animation and poor audio. Profanity is theirs, but the point is kind of taken that, you know, the audio is a problem. So you can see that that's important. So there are lots of really good ways to use audio in e-learning, for example. So here's an example of an e-learning course. I'll show you that really quickly. So here in this instance, if I just play the audio, you can see the audio is AI generated and it just replicates this text. So
get ready to experience the positive vibes that furry friends bring to the office.
Okay, and in this instance, all they're doing is really just giving you an alternative delivery of the same content. So if someone wants to hear the content, they can do that. So that's just kind of one kind of simple approach to using audio. Another kind of better approach, and this is a really kind of high level example, and I'm not necessarily expecting or encouraging people to do this, but just to showcase a good example. So this is an e-learning course from the Open University. It's got these nice little crime scenes and kind of case studies, but I'm just going to play you a little bit of this.
At about 9:30 this morning, after staying up till 4 a.m. playing computer games, 22-year-old Jason Wakefield was crossing the warehouse floor carrying a stack of boxes. Jason was joking with his friend and colleague over his radio, and as he was distracted, he walked across the path used by forklift trucks and tug vehicles. A forklift truck being driven by 18-year-old Scott Kirk hit Jason. Jason was knocked to the floor.
So obviously that's a very high quality animation that they've produced there, but audio has played a key role in this little bit of narrative and this bit of storytelling. So you could hear the audio, the sound of the forklift truck, you could hear the audio from the walkie-talkie, all these kind of distractions, and they were kind of elements of that narrative and that story. So here I think is a really good example of how audio can be used to kind of enhance the story and the storytelling. Again, this would have required a professional to make. It's not something I necessarily expect you to do, but again, it's just to kind of help you think about how audio can be used in learning. So just to jump back to my slides. Again, here's another example in kind of a scenario-based e-learning example. These people are teaching people how to do phone sales. And in this example, you can play the audio clip and you hear the conversation, and then you can kind of tell the response that you want to give. So a bit more prosaic and mundane, but you know, again, it shows kind of the context that you might use audio. And again, this applies to kind of all multimedia learning. You know, think about what you're trying to communicate with the learner first, and then see if audio or video or text or whatever it might be is the most effective way to communicate that information. So, you know, thinking about what the learner needs to learn and how to deliver that in the most effective way is really kind of the thing that should be kind of foremost in your mind. So really quickly, I'm just going to talk about podcasting, but again, not necessarily with the idea of you doing podcasting. And you'll see what I mean as we get to the demo in Canvas shortly. So I'm sure we're all familiar at this point, but a podcast is basically a digital audio file made available on the internet for downloading to a computer or mobile device. And on the left there, you see an iPod from kind of, I guess, maybe about a decade ago. I think I still have one of these actually. And actually the device kind of helped, it was gave an affordance to people making audio that could be disseminated and just listened to on a portable device. So before that, you would have had to make a cassette tape, and it wasn't as easily, it wouldn't have been as easy to disseminate, but the technology kind of gave a new affordance. So the word podcast itself is a portmanteau. So it combines the word pod, the iPod on the left, and the word broadcast, so the cast element at the end. So you have podcast. So when they first came out, they were often referred to as audio blogs. So kind of in the 2010s, blogging became a very, very big thing. It was described as a disruptive media. And I guess important for what we're talking about today, it was initially described as post-broadcasting or narrowcasting as an alternative. So when we think of broadcasting, we think of things like the BBC or RTE, where the national radio body is sending out information to the widest amount of people. So it's trying to make something that's accessible to a really, really wide amount of people. So often radio content I find is not very interesting, but because they're trying to appeal to the many and they can't get into the specifics of certain things. And they also don't give much time to certain pieces of content because they have a schedule, they have advertisers that they have to appease and so on. Whereas the disruptive nature of podcasting changed all that. It meant I could choose a super niche topic. I could talk about, genetics, that was only in a really detailed way that would have only been of interest or accessible to a small number of people. Doesn't matter if it's one person, 10 person, 100 people. Then that I could make that and kind of disseminate that, and those interested parties could listen to that. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get at today, that idea of narrowcasting. And so podcasting then, or audio for education, basically facilitates scholarly communication with the immediacy of the internet. And so here, just again, for historical context, I'm going to jump into a demo now in a second. This is where the idea of podcasting kind of came up, or the term podcasting came out. It's an article by Ben Hammersley called Audible Revolution from 2004 in The Guardian. And here he is kind of talking about, what do we call this thing? Is it audio blogging? Is it guerrilla media? Is it podcasting? And this is kind of like the point at which the term podcasting came out. A big kind of milestone in this was the true crime drama Serial. So this brought a lot of people into podcasting, kind of changed the audience. And it kind of relied heavily on the ubiquity of the smartphone. So again, kind of thinking about the devices that we have and our students have, they all have a smartphone of some shape or form, and accessing audio through that is very, very easy. Just very briefly then, from a kind of a research approach, a lot of people use podcasting for research and teaching. So Michaela Benson here, who's a sociologist from the UK, she has done a series of research projects where they interview people, but the interviews are all released as podcasts. And then that becomes, the data for the research project. But additionally, it's also releasing that data set to a wider audience, so people can, listen to it and reinterpret it and rewrite about it if they want. And it's also making that research publicly accessible. So anyone who wants to, in this case, learn more about Britons abroad during the Brexit period can listen to the podcast. So that's kind of making that research widely accessible. And then just around the kind of COVID pandemic, online learning and so on, you can see audio, not the highest ranked thing for students, but audio was highly ranked in terms of an important kind of instructional element to have online for education. So these are just some examples of different podcasts. And again, kind of thinking about what you can do for your students. We often embed YouTube videos into our courses, for example, but there's lots of really great podcasts out there. The Nature Science podcast is an excellent example. Again, NASA have a lot of kind of outreach podcast information out there, which is useful for teaching in that area. And also, good shows like BBC have the Life Scientific, lots of great interviews there. And these can be embedded in your Canvas courses, for example. So again, you don't have to make the audio content. You can draw in that audio content from other creators. Okay, so kind of getting on to the, I guess, the title of the session, which is kind of using audio to engage your students. So a couple of tips and suggestions. So again, we talked about podcasting and the idea of narrowcast as opposed to broadcast. Again, that's making some audio content for a smaller audience. In your case, this might be 30 or 50 students. So that's something that you can do. So you can easily make a narrowcast, let's call them like a course-based podcast on your phone, just using the voice memos function on your phone. I use iOS. That's got a native voice memos app. I'm sure there's a similar one on Android, or if not, you can download one from your app store. And so it's very easy to just record a kind of a voice memo on your phone. You can even do it like when you're having your morning coffee, for example. Like if you've issued a certain assignment or a certain reading to your students and you're having a coffee and something comes to mind about it, you can quickly turn on your phone, record a voice memo, say, thinking about that article. It also brings to mind this other article by, Dr. Smith. I'd encourage you to look at that as well if you have some extra time. Stop recording and you can upload that straight into your Canvas course. That's really, really easy. And it's kind of a nice way of, I don't know, personalizing, I guess, the learning experience for the students. You could type that, but actually the idea that you're kind of thinking about the course in real time when you're having your morning coffee and you're kind of engaged with your students, I think that probably has, that probably rings true for the student in some way. It's like, oh, my teacher's still thinking about this or trying to support me in my learning. I think that's a nice kind of personalizing characteristic of audio. The other thing that you can do as well is create conversations with experts, so colleagues and peers in your discipline. So again, you could use the voice notes function in your phone, meet another colleague from your department or from the university and have a coffee with them and record that conversation. Cafe might not be the best place because you get lots of ambient noise, like clinking glasses and so on. But if you're in an office, there's two of you there, you put the phone kind of relatively close in between you, and you just record a conversation. You can ask that other expert, that colleague, questions, and again, upload that to your course. So in a way, you've made this little kind of, dialogic kind of conversational piece of audio content for your students they can listen to, and then they can respond to that in the discussion function in Canvas, for example. We often talk about using video introductions in your Canvas courses here in TEL. It's a really nice way to kind of personalize and connect with your students. So instead of a video introduction, if you don't have time to make that video content and kind of make it look good, an audio introduction works really well. I'm going to show you an example of that shortly. You can also think about student-generated audio assignments. So you can ask them to respond to discussions using audio, or you can create an alternative type assessment, and I'll show you a bit more about that in a second, or audio reflection pieces. So just as an example of an alternative, or what I would describe certainly as an authentic group assessment, you could assign students or ask them to make a podcast episode. This is not for kind of wider dissemination. It's mainly, it's really just for an assignment. And I think this is a really good thing to do in the sense that you can ask them to focus on a particular topic that you've taught in your course. But it's really a team-based exercise in the sense that, you get them to come together, you get them to agree on a topic that's aligned with the course themes, and then you approve that. Once they've done that, step 2 would be to kind of plan and research. So they would divide the roles. So one person could be a host, one person could be a researcher, another person could be an editor. They would have to outline the episode, write their talking points. These could be bullet points that they would talk to, or it could be fully scripted. They would have to give accurate information and then provide all the sources as a bibliography. And then the kind of final output will be recording. And, you could specify that this doesn't have to be high quality. Using their phone is enough, but it's really about the kind of production, the discussion, the planning, and the research that goes into it. And then, of course, some students may be into this, and they might kind of start adding bits of music, start adding, sound effects and so on. And then the submission itself could be like, a 10-minute audio file, 1 or 2 people talking. It could be one person telling a story of something. And then you could get them to write a little summary at the end as well, to kind of say who did what works this side, and so on. So that's kind of an idea of an alternative assessment, a group assessment that can be done with students. I think there's a lot of value in doing something like that. Um, it also helps them think about their presentation skills and their group working skills as well. So, and then these are kind of the things that you would maybe talk to them about, planning the episode, what equipment and space are they going to use, use a quiet space if they're going to use their phone. Do they need to edit it? You can edit using, freely available tools like Audacity, and then you just host it on your Canvas course, for example. So that's kind of a worksheet that you might use for this kind of thing. So I'm going to skip by that. So maybe just really quickly as a reflective question, I'm not going to ask you to respond to this, but kind of given what we've been talking about thus far, when was the last time that you listened to audio, like a podcast or an audiobook, and felt kind of engaged by that? Maybe you can think about why it was engaging, and then also think about, can you translate that kind of engagement through audio into your teaching practice? So, if you've listened to a good audio interview, the person communicated an idea really well, using kind of, evocative imagery or whatever that might be, can you replicate that in relation to your topic and use that in your Canvas course? So these are just some examples. I'm going to skip that. So I talked about the different kind of voice memo apps. This is the one that's available on the iPhone. Again, the Android users will have a different version, but they're all more or less the same. You can record voice memos really quickly. You can pause them and restart them, as I mentioned, in terms of kind of giving dissertation feedback as one option. You can edit the recordings in here. So, if you do a false take or there's some kind of unnecessary sound at the beginning, you can trim it using the trim function up there, like this guy here. So you can edit the recording and then you can share it to your computer and then just upload it. So that's really, really handy. There are a lot of new tools available that can help enhance speech. So for example, Adobe has a podcast tool. I'm not 100% sure how long it will let you do on the free version. So I've got the Adobe tool, so I've got the full version here. But basically, this just uses AI. So if you've recorded a piece of audio that isn't very good and it's hard to hear, you can upload it to a tool like this, and it will enhance the speech. So it would do the kind of things that a sound engineer would do. It would compress the audio. It would try and EQ it to kind of make it sound clearer. And it'll do this for you. And you can see that there's a kind of a slider here. So if the audio is really bad and you have it up at like 90% strength, it starts to digitize the speech a little bit, but you can pull this little audio or this little marker back a little bit, and it makes it less affected. So it's kind of dry to wet ratio, and it gives you like a really, really good outcome. So it's a really useful tool. I mentioned a while ago the idea of recording conversations with other experts in your field. So this might be a colleague on campus, but it could also be a colleague from another institution, someone that you know well who's moved somewhere else, or someone that you've met at a conference. You could arrange a conversation about a certain topic related to your discipline, and you could record it via Zoom. One of the functions that's really useful in Zoom is that you can separate the audio files or the different stems. So here you can see if you log into your Zoom, you go to your settings, you go to recordings, and then down here on the bottom, you've got two tick boxes. So one is to record one audio file for all participants, and that means you just have this one file which has everyone's voice. So if you have 4 participants on the call, they're all embedded into one audio file. But what's really useful is that this one down here, if you have this ticked on, it records a separate audio file for each participant. And what this means is if 3 of your microphones are really good, but one person's isn't, you now have the ability to either fix that, or if you can't do it, maybe you can talk to somebody like myself and Tell to see if I can help kind of clean up that audio. And then you can remix those 4 audio channels into one audio file that you can share on your Canvas course. So that's a really useful function. So again, the idea is that you have that conversation with an expert, you drag that into Canvas and you use it as a kind of a talking point for your students. So that's quite useful. Just a signpost, there's a lot of really nice easy to use tools out there, such as this kind of mixing desk and these microphones. These give you a really, really high quality output. And we have one of these here in the TEL studio. So some of you will be familiar with the e-learning studios that I'm in here at the moment. The last one here at the back has this mixing desk and 3 microphones set up. So if you did want to have a conversation with some colleagues for a podcast or just for your course, you could do that here. So you can book that space to signpost it. And then if you do want to edit it, if you want to go beyond just recording it on your phone and uploading it to your course, you can use a tool called like Audacity, which is a relatively simple audio editor. It's free and open source. And they're kind of constantly improving it and upgrading it. So it's actually quite a good editing tool. Or there are native editing tools on your computer. So this is GarageBand, which comes on the Macs, and you can see that there's just a voice recording option there. So a lot of tools like that out there. So I guess kind of thinking about the future trends then. Some of you will have seen this already. So Notebook LM is kind of
Hey everyone, and
so yeah, Notebook LM is this kind of tool here where you can upload a number of different articles, for example. So you can see here on the left, there's a number of different articles that I've uploaded. And then you can start prompting that and asking it to, generate a study guide or a table of contents. And you can ask it to interrogate those articles, say, why is audio for education good, for example? And it'll give you back different responses. And then interestingly, it'll generate an audio podcast, a completely AI generated audio podcast. And I'll just show you what that sounds like.
Hey everyone, and welcome to today's deep dive. We are going to be diving into the world of podcasts in education.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, it's way more interesting than it might sound at first, trust me. We've got a stack of research papers right here.
Okay, so it's basically making a podcast out of those research papers that I uploaded. It's kind of incredible, but the novelty wears off really quickly because it's the same voice all the time. And I guess it lacks that humanness, It's quite perfect, almost too perfect. And, maybe we appreciate the kind of imperfections of people and, the kind of thought process we can see as people are trying to work through it.
Hey everyone.
But as you know, the AI kind of revolution is moving at quite a pace. So the Notebook LM podcast, quite limited. This other more recent tool, JellyPod, is much more dynamic. You can choose a whole range of different voices. I think you can get it to synthesize your own voice, and you can edit the transcript. So very, very powerful tool if you wanted to start writing scripts and getting it to generate podcasts that you could use in your courses. And again, just a caveat here, I'm not recommending that you use any of these tools. I'm really just signposting to you that they exist. And they're worth kind of knowing about at very least if you're not using them. And again, if you are interested in podcasting, it's really easy to disseminate a podcast. Actually, there's not really any cost involved in it. Spotify, for example, allow you to actually record straight into Spotify. You can edit the podcast in there and disseminate it from there, and it'll disseminate out to Apple and then to all the other different podcast catchers. So really quickly then, I'm just going to jump into Canvas just to show you one or two things. So here I am in my Canvas course. It's just a sandbox course that I have. And I've just set up this topic here for audio for education, just by way of example. So here you can see I've got a welcome section set up in this unit, and I've got my audio embedded here. So I'm doing this from Canvas Studio. I'm going to show you that in a second. And you can see here, rather than a video, I've recorded a short audio file. I've turned the comments on so students can respond here saying, I like this introduction. I didn't understand that point. Can you share some more resources about this? So let's play that for a second. Welcome to this unit on Audio for Education, where we explore the powerful role sound plays in enhancing learning experiences. In this unit, you'll discover how audio can engage diversity. And, your students can comment on that. That's quite useful. You can turn the comments off as well if you want. And then kind of similarly, you can have a few, little points talking or kind of bullet points underneath about what the session is, the unit or the section is about. And then some kind of to-dos. So I'm going to give them a prompt on an article in the next page, and then ask them to engage in the discussion with voice notes. So if I click into the next unit, you can see here, I've got a journal article that I want them to read. And rather than writing the prompts, I've asked them to listen to this kind of audio prompt here. And again, please read the following article and think about the way that the author has engaged with the idea of podcasting for PhD students. So again, that's just one way that you can start using it. And again, here I've added a discussion. So again, embedding another audio clip here into the discussion function, and then kind of allowing the students to respond to that. Actually, I should just jump into the view a student mode just so you see it a bit more. So yeah, this is kind of more along the lines of what your student will see. They could have an audio prompt. And in this instance here, the student has said, my thoughts are attached, and they've uploaded an MP3 file. So a lot of people are quite interested into voice notes rather than text messages. So, some students who are maybe into that might kind of welcome the idea of this. It's kind of worth experimenting with and seeing if they'll engage with it. And then, sorry, I'm just going to jump back out of there, back to my units. So, and then also, you could set up an assignment as I talked about earlier on. If I go back here. Assignment, yeah, there you go. So this kind of assignment where you would get students to create a podcast on a topic. Again, here I've just made a Canvas assignment. I've given them a little prompt, make a 15-minute podcast episode on a related topic, upload the audio file in MP3 format, and so on. So I've already uploaded the file, but if you wanted just to see what the student would see, they, in the same way that they would upload a Word document or whatever, they can just choose the file from their computer and upload from there. And I'm just going to leave student view here. And so if I jump into my grade section here to see this assignment, this is just my test student. I can see here, this is the group podcast assignment. If I click on this, I can open the speed grader. And I can see here there's an audio file up here on the top. So if I want to listen to that, I can just click on it. It'll download the file, and then I can give them their feedback and their grade. So as I mentioned before, a little bit earlier, if I did want to give them speech to text feedback, I could do that here, clicking on the that little speaker icon. I could say, this is a great assignment. Well done on this. I hope you benefited from the group collaboration. And then you can see that we have the speech to text there. Or if I wanted to record, like I could be listening to that assignment on the go, driving to work. And then when I stop the car and I've parked up before I go, I could just record my feedback as a voice memo. And again, just use the paperclip icon and upload the a little well done note and submit that. And then you would see that they would get their audio feedback and they could listen to that. Back there. Here we go. Well done. That was a really excellent assignment. Keep up the good work. So you can see you can really quickly give them audio feedback while you're on the go as well there. And just really briefly to show you where I embedded that audio from. So some of you will be aware, but if you're not, please do investigate it. If I look at the global navigation menu here in Canvas, you can see that there's this kind of screen with some lines coming out of it, a little kind of octopus screen, I guess. This is Canvas Studio. And this is basically like a multimedia library where you can upload and edit video content and audio content. So for example, here I am in Canvas Studio. If I go up to the top right, I can click create. I can do a screen capture from in here, but I can also add media. So those 3 little voice notes that I added to my course, I added them from here, not in the course, but from Canvas Studio. I can click the add media function. You can see you can upload a podcast episode from YouTube there if you wanted and embed it in your course, or you can browse the files in your computer. That's what I did. And you can see here along the top, I've got 3 different audio files. The good thing about this, or the really useful thing about this, is if you did record a piece of audio a quite detailed piece of audio, you can assign a quiz to this as well, in the same way that you can assign a quiz to a video. So when I'm in studio mode here, I can click the three dots and I can create a quiz. And I can call this like year one quiz, give it a description. I can hide the markers on the timeline. You can either show or hide them. I would hide them because if you don't hide them, the students will just skip the content and jump straight to the questions. And then I can get started, and then you can start adding questions. So here you can see I've got my audio file. Along the timeline here on the bottom, there is a little plus icon. So if I click on that, say here, I can add a multiple choice question. Save. And so now you can see I've embedded a question into that. So that's kind of something that's interesting to and worth exploring. So I'm just trying to render out my audio here at the moment. So yeah, so once you've uploaded your content into Canvas Studio, so you add media, upload the file from your computer. From there, you can go into your course. So I'm just going to go into my dashboard, go into my sandbox course here, and I just add a piece of content to my unit. Clicking the plus, so it can be whatever page. I can create page. So I'll call this tests. And then I get my audio test page down here. I can see it's unpublished. Let's publish it. So if I click into my audio tests, I get my blank page as I expect. When I click the edit function here, I can write little note, please listen to this. And going along the top here, with this little plugin icon, if I click down this menu, I can see Canvas Studio. If you don't see it, maybe because you haven't used it, you might need to hit the View All button. It'll show you the different apps available. But because I've used it, I can see it here. So if I click Canvas Studio, it opens up my Canvas Studio space. I can see my video files down here, but I can also see the audio files. And here, this one, I can tell because of this little rocket that I've added a quiz to it. This one doesn't have that. So let's say I want to add this reflexive question in. I can click that. And if I want the students to be able to download the media, I can do that from here as well. I can allow them to download that audio file so that they can listen to it on their phone on the go, which is, again, a benefit of audio. Embed the media and save. Those comments can be turned off as well, by the way, in Canvas Studio. And so there you see your embedded content. And that's that really. So really straightforward. You can record the voice memo on your phone, upload it to Canvas Studio, and then embed it in your course. So I guess that's one really kind of quick way to get your audio content in there. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to wrap up here really quickly. Just very finally on the future trajectories. So we did look at JellyPod and Notebook LM. So like there are just waves and waves of various AI tools coming down the path, loads of AI teachers and so on. In reality, these will never replace real teachers, I think. While they may be very effective and do certain things very, very well, I think something that they don't do is kind of offer the authentic, that idea of authenticity that people have, and humans with all our imperfections, I think people like to hear that real human conversation, teasing out ideas, kind of understanding a topic kind of bit by bit. While it might be probably presented in a more logical way by AI sometimes, I think the idea of authenticity isn't lost on listeners, I think. So just in terms of conclusion really quickly, if you're making a kind of more produced work, it's worth spending time on, to make sure that your audio quality is good. It can make or break a project if you're doing something that's more high level. But in terms of what we're talking about today, which is really sharing ideas with your students, communication is the main thing. Voice memos work really, really well for that. And I'd encourage you to use it. So I think the takeaway for today, is to try out one audio approach in your upcoming teaching. So that's maybe using audio for an introduction, for a voice note discussion, maybe exploring an audio-based assignment. See if your students are into it. See how you find it. See is it effective. I think it's worth exploring. If you want to know more about that, you can talk to us. In terms of Zoom and things like that I mentioned earlier, if you need any support with that, you can go to the to the TEL website, tel.cit.ie, and we've got loads of resources there. We probably don't have time for questions because I'm mindful people are going to have a class starting shortly. But you can reach out to us. So if you have any questions about the topic today, you can reach out to us at edtech@mtu.ie, the TEL website, Blue Sky, or all of these video sessions are all recorded and archived on our YouTube site. So with that, I will say thank you. If there are any questions, I will try and follow up with them in the follow-up email. But yeah, thanks for your time. Hopefully that was helpful and interesting. Give audio a go. Thanks.